impact stemming from the operation of the business. However, the city asserts that a more proper balancing of the factors in determining whether to impose liquor license non-renewal or a lesser sanction based on the ALJ's clear finding that good cause supports adverse liquor license action in this matter indicates that non-renewal is the most appropriate action for the following reasons. A crucial factor in this balance is the ongoing and admitted failure of La Que Buena to abide by a specific license condition imposed upon it and agreed to it as part of a license settlement agreement signed in April 2014. La Que Buena agreed to install panic hardware on its rear entry door in addition to a host of other security conditions. La Que Buena concedes it has altogether failed to install the panic hardware, which is required by the fire code and which has the potential to create a clear life safety hazard by restricting egress from the rear during an emergency situation. The record also reflects that La Que Buena has not always complied with other security conditions from the license settlement agreements, including the posting of 2 security guards at designated locations during certain time periods. Additionally, the record reflects that during 2015, La Que Buena's present security team was not even aware of the currently applicable list of multiple license conditions it was their duty to enforce, that they were unaware of the legal occupancy level of the establishment, and that they allowed over-occupancy during special events. This ongoing failure to comply with agreed-upon and legally imposed license conditions evidences a disregard to responsibly manage the business and is in direct and continuing violation of Minneapolis ordinance, which provides that, quote, "It shall be the responsibility of the licensee to fully comply with all conditions of license, and that failure to comply shall be adequate grounds for the refusal to renew said license," unquote. This failure provides an independent and freestanding basis to refuse to renew the liquor license, and, taken in conjunction with all of the other incidents and violations and impact, strongly supports the conclusion that non-renewal is the most appropriate sanction with regard to the liquor license. Just a couple more brief comments. The ALJ report also analyzed the time of night at which many of the violent incidents occurred and found that 8 of the 15 incidents occurred at 2 a.m. or later. The ALJ cited this as evidence supporting a finding that much of the negative public impact is attributable to the late hours food license and not to the liquor license. However, as the report and record also establish, a 2 a.m. liquor license allows for patrons to continue consuming alcohol until 2:30 a.m. on premises. The late hours food license only authorizes continued presence of customers after 2:30 a.m. for the purpose of consuming food. So, the same record therefore establishes that in all reality, 13 of the 15 incidents, including both the November 2013 mass shooting and murder and the November 2014 shooting, in fact occurred during the hours of operation of the liquor license, and that only 2 occurred during the late hours food license hours. This distinction also strongly supports a finding that non-renewal of the liquor license is the most appropriate sanction in this matter. Finally, Although in general terms, the level of violent and disorderly activity taking place at the establishment has decreased since the filing of this adverse action in early 2015, the record reflects that there have been other periods of relative calm at the establishment during the multiple years that the city has been expending enormous quantities of resources dealing with the violations and noncompliance at La Que Buena. Certainly, renewed violence could once again flare up if the license were renewed as it has in the past. The city has engaged in an admirable and lengthy course of proactive engagement and progressive discipline with La Que Buena, which has proved ultimately unsuccessful in that blood has been shed multiple times at the restaurant and licensing violations have continued to amass. At some point, it is incumbent upon the city to deny the privilege of continued liquor license operation at a site with such a lengthy history of both license violations and disruptive and dangerous criminal activity. That time is now, and quite frankly, it's overdue. The law recognizes that the holding of a liquor license is a highly regulated privilege and not a right or a property interest. The law also recognizes that it is the affirmative responsibility of a liquor license holder to prevent criminal and nuisance activity on its premises, and that it is most decidedly not the responsibility of the city or its police force to do so on behalf of the licensee. The ongoing, extensive, and serious nature of the violations and criminal activity that have continued to occur through the years at La Que Buena conclusively demonstrates that the responsibilities that attach to the holding of a liquor license have not been fulfilled by this license holder. The City of Minneapolis, therefore, requests that the City Council adopt and incorporate the report of the ALJ in this matter, as modified by the City's written exceptions, and thereby refuse to renew both the Class E on-sale liquor and special late hours food licenses held by La Que Buena Incorporated and Juan and Maria Sanchez doing business as La Que Buena. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Fussy. I have a series of questions, but I'm going to hold them until after hearing from the owner and or their representative. But first, I'll read an introductory statement. This is a quasi-judicial business license hearing for which this committee is limited by law to hearing argument from the licensee or the licensee's representative, but is prohibited from considering any further evidence or taking any further testimony. This means that the parties are required to limit their comments to arguments specifically addressing the evidence or testimony introduced before the administrative law judge, which is part of the record that is already before us. You may not offer, and we may not consider, any new or additional evidence. The committee has reviewed the report and recommendation of the ALJ and any written exceptions filed by the parties and has been provided with the official record of the administrative hearing. Based solely on this official record and the arguments that the parties make today, the City Council may affirm, modify, or reverse the recommendation that is before us. So having read that introductory statement, I would like to invite up either the owner, licensee of the establishment, and or the representative on their behalf. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jordan Kushner. I'm an attorney. My business address is 431 South 7th Street, Suite 2446, Minneapolis, 55415. And I'll be presenting legal arguments, and the owner the plan is to also have the owner make some brief comments. So if I could just let you know that my planned sequence is I'll be making some statements, and then if the owner can then come up and make a statement, that would be appreciated.
Mr. Christian, that would be fine so long as whatever statement does not go beyond the administrative record before us. So I welcome any argument from you so long as it complies with what I've read and within limitation as far as time.
And so the owners are, as was mentioned, Juan Sanchez and Maria Sanchez, who are sitting in the front row, and between them is the manager of La Que Buena, Cindy Leon. And the owner's two of the owner's sons are here too, sitting in the second row. And then I think there's also a business owner who's supportive, the owner of Las Mojeras, who's sitting in the back, who's a neighboring business down the street. This is a genuine family-owned, family-run business that's been in business it's been operating a restaurant since 2002. The administrative law judge conducted a 4-day hearing, heard 4 days of testimony, heard extensive testimony from the city representatives, as well as from the owners, the manager, former employees, and residents in the neighborhoods, and then made her findings and recommendations. Now, the one critical point is what Mr. Fussy describes as a minor exception the city has is, in fact, a major critical exception that they have to the administrative law judge, because the administrative law judge recommended that La Que Buena's liquor license be renewed with conditions. Not going by that isn't a minor exception. That's basically the difference between whether or not La Que Buena can remain in business or not, whether they can be viable to continue with their liquor license. And that's the most important recommendation the administrative law judge made. And again, it was based on hearing 4 days of testimony, considering all the evidence and all the circumstances. And what the administrative law judge heard first was that this is a genuine family business where the husband and wife literally built the restaurant on what was then a vacant block that had no other businesses at the time. Now it's got more businesses, but still has a good deal of vacancies. The neighborhood that was subject to very high crime. Mr. Sanchez built the business with his own hands, along with borrowing a substantial amount of money, over $200,000, or coming up with $200,000 to pay for labor that he wasn't able to do himself. And the wife, the husband, have operated the business hands-on ever since. And their children, who were children at the time and worked at the business since they were children and now are adults, also run the business as well. Now, this is a high crime area, and the testimony was clear that this is a block that is rife with prostitution, robberies, drug dealing, gang activity, and the family and their employees have been dedicated this whole time to keep the business going and to make the business successful. And they have made it successful because they've been able to operate profitably and viably. They have a large customer constituency within the community itself. They also cater to people in the Mexican community who come from long distances because they do have unique, authentic Mexican food that isn't available elsewhere. And they also cater to the larger community. People are interested in the cultural experience. And because of the nature of the neighborhood, it's had its ups and downs with the crime problems. What was clear is that there's no evidence whatsoever of malfeasance on behalf of the ownership. They've always tried diligently to operate the business effectively, and the testimony of the licensing officials was that the owners always, and the management always worked with the city, was always eager to work with the city and follow their directions and do the best that they could. And I think if you look at the ALJ's findings, we would immediately think from the city that somehow La Que Buena was allowing crime to happen in the restaurant, and that nothing could be further from the truth. This is an area that has a great deal of criminal activity, and it often comes into the restaurant. On a lot of these instances, the testimony from city licensing is that based on her review of the reports, they didn't have anyone come to testify who had firsthand experiences about the incidents, but based on the report, she couldn't find fault with anything La Buena did. They'd have an unruly customer, or there'd be a fight in there, they call the police. That's what they always did right away. They made the best efforts to control the situation. They called the police to address the problem. The worst incident, which was a drive-by shooting, happened. Someone came up outside the restaurant, shot the gun inside the restaurant. It was a horrible, traumatic experience for everyone involved. There's no testimony that the restaurant could have done anything to prevent that from happening. This was apparently a gang-related hit. The person who got killed wasn't known to the people there, and the person who came up and shot outside the window never came in the restaurant. There was no control over what happened with him. The other shootings have also happened off premises where there have been fights and people from off premises. There's been gunfire, and then La Buena gets blamed because the incident happened. Now, we understand that there's licensees' responsibilities to maintain security at the premises, but at the same time, they can't control what's going on in the larger neighborhood. And what the administrative law judge also heard was extensive testimony from residents in the neighborhood that they believe that the restaurant contributes or helps the security in the neighborhood because of the activity and because of their security, that if La Buena was gone, the problems of the neighborhood would become worse because you'd have a vacant space, you wouldn't have professional security guards patrolling the restaurant and the block at late night hours. And so, as problematic as the incidents have happened, these are incidents that would be happening because of the nature of the community. And they would be happening, so you wouldn't be getting rid of the problem by getting rid of La Buena. You'd be making the problem worse. The testimony was extensive by the professional security guards that La Buena hired at the beginning of the year. I take exception with Mr. Fussy's comment that they weren't hiring the required number of 2 security guards. The number of security guards that they're supposed to hire is based on the occupancy of the restaurant, and there wasn't testimony that they didn't have enough security guards based on the occupancy of the restaurant. But in any event, there are 2 professional security guards at least that patrol the restaurant on the weekend and late night hours. It's been very effective since they started that process in February. There haven't been any reported incidents at the restaurant. That's something that the administrative law judge relied on. These security guards presented video that they took of the scene in the neighborhood where they showed the prostitution and the loitering that happens and the people who are drunk and under the influence in the neighborhood, and the efforts that they make not only to keep the restaurant safe, but to patrol the block and keep order on the block to the extent that they can as well. So they become a positive contributor in the community. And then the area that Mr. Fussy made the most, made the largest, the thought indicated was so significant as a grounds to depart from the ALJ's recommendation was that the La Buena hadn't followed one of the conditions that was set forth in the licensing settlement conference. There's a long list of conditions. The inspector, Julie Casey, who testified, said to her knowledge, La Buena followed every condition. But in the honesty of the owner and the manager, they revealed at the hearing that there was one specific condition that they haven't yet been able to abide by, and that was the installation of a panic door. Now, this wasn't presented as a grounds for a license violation in the first place. It shouldn't be grounds for a license non-renewal because it wasn't something that they had notice of as a grounds for non-renewal. So it's not something that was before that was presented in the process. I mean, they're supposed to have notice of what the grounds are for non-renewal. But the situation they explained behind
I'm sorry, Mr. Kujan, I just have one quick question about that.
Yes.
So the panic door that was requested as part of the settlement conference. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if it's requested as part of the settlement conference, Mr. Fussy, then non-compliance with that conference would be grounds for a non-renewal. Is that correct?
Mr. Vice Chair, I believe that's correct.
Okay. And it's our, what I'm saying is that they have to, La Que Buena has to be provided with notice of the grounds for non-renewal as part of the process, and that wasn't set forth as one of the grounds for non-renewal. So it's something that should have been they should have had notice of and be able to present it in the course of the process, which didn't happen because it was just revealed by the licensee itself. And what the situation is with the panic door is that in order to have a panic door, the door has to open out. And the door that La Que Buena had opened in. And what they discovered was that because of the design around the building, that the concrete on the outside was higher than the plane of the restaurant. So in order to open the door out, they would have to redesign the whole ground outside the restaurant, and found that the cost of that would be about $30,000. And they weren't able to make that kind of expenditure. Now, if that had been presented as notice to them as a violation, this is something that they weren't aware of at the time of the settlement conference, and so it wasn't raised and discussed. If they were, obviously it would have been addressed. But if they had proper notice of that issue, there is a procedure set forth in our paperwork. There is a procedure to get a variance for that requirement from the fire department based on economic hardship, and so that's an issue that could be considered.
One second, Mr. Kushner. Councilmember Goodman.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Kushner a question about that. Why did your client agree to put in the panic door as a settlement conference requirement if they weren't going to do it? Knowing that if you don't do all of the things, you're going to get your license revoked, which is what could potentially happen. Why did they agree to it then?
When they agreed to it, they had every intention of installing that panic door. It wasn't until after they proceeded to take the measures to install the panic door that they found out how expensive it would be, that the building wasn't architecturally designed to have a panic door, and they would have to redo the whole. They'd have to redo the whole concrete. They'd have to lower the level of the ground outside the building, or raise the level of the ground inside the building. And they had to hire an architect.
Well, I understand, Mr. Kushner, why they didn't do it, but why did they agree to do it
because,
and then not do it, leaving them open? And then, Mr. Fussy, I'm just wondering, is that a fire code requirement generally? So isn't that another issue? Are you allowed to have a club with hours like this whose door opens inside? Isn't that just generally a fire issue?
Madam Chair, that is correct, and I believe the record reflects that it is a current fire code violation.
And so the point was that they had no idea how complicated it was going to be when they agreed to it. They thought it was a matter of spending, whatever number of several thousands of dollars to install a new door, and they were fully prepared to do it. They didn't realize the expense at the time. So they just like all the other conditions, they had every intention of following every condition that was set forth in that settlement conference. But they didn't understand at the time. So they never agreed to something without the intention of following up. That's completely the opposite of what was going on. But what their intention was to install the panic door. They wanted to install a panic door. It was a good idea.
I understand this part. If you can move on to the next topic.
All right.
Yeah.
But so ultimately, though, this isn't, as he said, the fire code does provide for variances, even though it's in there. And if they were given the notice of this issue, they could have proceeded with applying for a variance, and they should be given an opportunity to do it. There shouldn't be grounds for not renewing the license that were never originally part of the city's listed grounds, which they had set forth. And they shouldn't be punished for being honest and forthcoming, where they explained in detail how they followed every single recommendation in the settlement agreement, but weren't able to comply with one specific provision. There were dozens of things that they did. And so some of them included extensive policies about gang activity, where they have a dress.
Yep. Mr. Kushner, it's been about 15 minutes
Sure.
already. So, if are there any specific items
Yeah.
from the findings of fact by the administrative law judge that you dispute
Yeah.
that you can cite?
Our position is that first that that most of these were based on hearsay, and it wasn't proper to base the finding of the incidents totally on hearsay, and there weren't specific findings.
Hearsay is not an element that I believe that we are legally dealing with right now
Okay.
as
All
part
right.
of this
So if you're
quasi-judicial
not-
hearing. But are there specific items within the ALJ report that you dispute?
I set
Specific.
Yes, I set them forth in my memo, and would take quite a long time to go through each of my differences. So
I read through the memo, but and I understand your overarching position and story. But are there specific items from the administrative law judge report that you dispute
Okay.
in
Beyond
terms of their findings of fact? And because while I agree with you that the administrative law judge did say you can enter into some more explicit conditions in the future rather than a non-renewal of the license, they did outline that
Yes.
the city had met every single one of the criteria set forth for a non-renewal. So are there specific instances that you dispute?
The specific instances, no. The specific instances happen. We dispute that La Que Buena was responsible for all the specific instances, and we also believe that there should be renewal of the late hours food license as well because of the security precautions that are in place. That they should be able to proceed with the late hours.
Is
food
it your
license.
contention that there have been 2 security guards at all times necessary?
Yes.
And is it your contention that those 2 security guards were aware of the maximum occupancy limits at all times?
Sometimes there are 3. Yes, what the security guards testified to is they weren't shown the settlement agreement, but they were told about all the requirements that were pertinent to their duties. They understood that. And all the requirements that dealt with providing security at the restaurant, they were aware of.
So
And I don't think
it's
there
your
was any-
contention that they were aware of the
Yeah.
maximum
And there was-
occupancy?
And there was no finding by the administrative law judge that I don't think that the security guards were not adequately informed about what the requirements were that they had to enforce. I think the administrative law judge found very positively about the work that they've been doing. And if I could just allow the
Very
owner to-
briefly,
okay.
yes, very briefly.
Mr. Sanchez, could you step up here?
Yeah.
Mi nombre es Juan Sánchez, dueño de La Que Buena.
My name is Juan Sanchez, and I'm owner of La Que Buena.
Yo solamente
¿Y
quiero
su
decirles
nombre de la casa?
nombre
¿Podría decir
The number, or
la dirección, address?
what's your address?
1611 East Lake Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Thank you.
1611
Ajá.
1611 Lake Street, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Soy el dueño de ahí el restaurante. Solamente, pues yo he trabajado muy duro para tener este negocio.
I am the owner of the restaurant, and I have worked very hard in order to... ¿Podemos apagar el... Quítelo, Román.
¿Dónde?
Excuse me, we're going to remove the equipment because I'm hearing myself in the... Quítelo. Vamos a apagarlo, mamá.
Te lo quito.
Pónganlo por allá. ¿Podría repetir?
And if you could keep the comments brief,
Por favor,
please.
sus comentarios que sean muy breves.
Ok, soy el dueño del restaurante La Que Buena y solamente estoy aquí para pedirles que me dejen mi licencia porque yo he trabajado muy duro.
So I'm the owner of the restaurant La Que Buena, and I'm here to request you to allow me to keep the license for my business because I have worked very hard.
Yo fui una de las personas que empecé en el 2002 que no había ningún negocio ahí en esa área y
I was one of the first people that started businesses in that area. There were no business around in that area.
pues, hemos sufrido mucho yo, mi esposa y mis hijos para seguir teniendo ese negocio y solamente les pido que
We have struggled a lot, my wife and my children, my family. We have struggled to keep this business going. And also I request you, please,
queremos seguir para adelante nosotros y Estoy nervioso, dígale que no puedo.
We wanted to keep moving forward, and I feel very nervous right now.
Pero pues solamente no sé qué decirles, dile que me disculpen, pero que estoy muy nervioso.
I apologize. I don't know what else to tell you. I am very nervous.
Solamente que he batallado mucho y no sé.
Just
No.
wanted to let you know that I've been working very hard for this. I don't know.
No need to be nervous. Thank you for your
No
testimony.
necesita estar nervioso. Gracias por su testimonio. Okay.
Mr. Fussy, I had several questions upon reading the report, and if you could just correct me if I'm wrong on any of these items.
You're on Council Howard, but one of the sons wanted to add a few comments.
This has been about one of the. It's not just open for testimony. This is simply for the owner and their representative, and I do appreciate your time, though. Mr. Fussy, several items that I wanted to go back over again after reading the report. These are the major events that I saw, and I believe that they were adopted into the ALJ findings of fact. So on September of 2013, there was a significant fight that spilled out onto the, I believe, patio or sidewalk where a gunfire was exchanged between two customers. And then I'm seeing in November of the same year of 2013, that was the murder where a guy shot 4 people, I believe, through the window. So they're correct in that the gunshot happened from outside, but it was just outside the window. Is that right?
That is correct. I would also make a minor correction. I believe that the record reflects that the September 2013 incident involving a large fight and exchange of gunfire, one of the participants involved in the gunfire exchange was a bouncer.
Was a bouncer, you said? Oh, so it was an employee of the establishment. In November of 2014, I have 2 customers, one of whom was underage, got in a large fight, and somebody, at least one of them was shot in the head anyway.